Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's interview. Today, I'm talking to Julia Landauer. She was the 2015 Motor Mile Speedway Limited Late Model champion, as well as just an all-around interesting person. Think that's the best way to describe you. So, Julia, how have you been doing?
I've been doing all right, thank you. I've been over in Europe for a few weeks now. Probably going to be hanging out here for the rest of the 2020 Euro NASCAR season, which ends the first weekend in December. But been adjusting, been making do with kind of the limitations that we have right now.
Now, the Euro Series, how big of a deal is that in Europe? Because I know I've seen other people talk about, and I think that's what Myatt Snyder drove last
hmm
year. Is it that big of a deal out in Europe, or?
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal, and I think there's quite a bit of sponsorship that goes into it. I would probably put it, maybe a little bit higher than like the ARCA level equivalent in the States.
Okay.
And I'm not super familiar with all forms of motorsport in Europe,
Hmm.
but it's definitely up there, and we're the premier race at a bunch of the different race weekends, and we go to some pretty awesome tracks. So I think that's a pretty good analysis. It's obviously not on like F1 level
Yeah.
or Le Mans level, but it's up there, and it's prestigious, and it's got a lot of really incredible drivers in it.
Okay. Well, I guess to begin, how did you first get involved with racing?
Yeah, so when I was 10, my parents were looking for some kind of activity that me, my sister, and brother could all do together on the weekends, and something that they could be involved in as well as parents instead of just dropping us off somewhere.
Hmm.
And they also really wanted something that their girls could do against boys, because it's me, my sister, and then my brother.
Hmm.
And I think my dad might have wanted to race go-karts when he was little and wasn't allowed to. But we got into go-karting, and originally it was just to get some life skills, learn how to be competitive, get some mechanical background, but I loved it right away and I was good at it right away. And so we advanced to national go-karting, and then I jumped into racing cars when I was 13 in the Skip Barber Racing Series, and then just kind of kept climbing the ladder, which is incredibly difficult if you don't come from a racing family.
Hmm.
And my parents are two, people who work full time, and but kept climbing the ranks. And then I won the Skip Barber Championship when I was 14. Did a little more Formula Car stuff, and then switched over to oval racing and some Ford Focus midgets, some Legends, and some late model stuff. As you said, I won the limited late model championship at Motor Mile in 2015. Did 2 years of K&N West, and then kind of did some part-time racing as I tried to get some sponsorship and figure out how to keep going. And then this year, running the full season of the Euro NASCAR series.
So now, when it comes to like being from New York and all, yeah, I used to always hear about people saying, "Oh, you have to move to Charlotte if you're going to want to do oval stuff or be in NASCAR." But you have people like Joey Logano that's come from the Northeast, Ryan Preece or whatever. Is there a lot of racing going on in like New York, or is it more of like more north the racing's going on,
Right.
or?
Yeah, so not super close to New York City, but in that whole tri-state area, New Jersey, Connecticut, outside of New York City, in New York, there's a decent amount of racing. I think I didn't ever do any late model stuff up there because I think they primarily do modified stuff.
Yeah.
But so all my racing when I was living in New York was primarily going somewhere else and traveling. Like I ran Ford Focus midgets for Bob East in Indiana and traveled out
Okay.
there. In my summers in college, I raced late models down in Virginia. I did a little bit of racing out in California when I was at school there. So there wasn't a ton of racing. And yes, to your point, I think, especially because I was so different coming from New York City, going to school, all this stuff. I really wanted to move to Charlotte. I really wanted to, spend a lot of time in the community, be able to, meet with people when I could, just get a sense of what the life was like, and, be able to work with NASCAR. And I was in the 2016 NASCAR Next class. So it was just really cool to be able to, just stop by NASCAR, meet with people, use the resources that they gave us. So it's been cool.
Growing up, who inspired you to continue pursuing motorsports? Like when you decided you wanted to take that next step and do this professionally, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I was pretty self-motivated. Once you win, it's really exciting and addicting, and you kind of want to keep doing it. My parents and my family were always incredibly supportive, and any family of a racer has to sacrifice quite a bit and invest quite a bit to be able to get, to a certain level. But then also, I mean, just, some of my heroes have always been, people like Paul Newman or Lynn
Hmm.
St. James or Michael Schumacher, Mark Martin. And, I've always kind of picked what I liked about these people and tried to make it into my own version of
Hmm.
who I could be. And, but you got to be pretty persistent. You got to persevere. And for me, it was always a kind of a balance. Like, am I having fun doing this? Am I proud of myself by continuing to do this? And that answer has always been yes so far. So I think as soon as, you know, that fun and that pride and that desire to just keep pushing through all of the negative and hard stuff, once that goes away, it might not be worth it, but I still got it. So gonna keep pushing.
So we often hear about people transitioning to both living and racing in America, but for you this year, it's been the opposite with you going to Europe. What is it like transitioning to both like living in Europe and the European style of racing when you've, grown up racing and living in the United States?
Yeah, so it's definitely tough. I have a new appreciation for everyone who's come over to the States, and COVID doesn't make it any easier.
Hmm.
I think that adds a layer of complexity to everything. But it's interesting. I really, really like the vibe of the European paddock. And again, it's a little tough because there's not a whole lot of intermingling with other people because there are restrictions with COVID.
Hmm.
But I really like the team, PK Carsport and Anthony Kumpen, and everyone I'm working with. It's I don't know, it's just great. It's a lot of fun. People take it really seriously, but also, have a good time. I think culturally it's really cool to be able to go to a bunch of different European countries.
Yeah.
It's a little tough living in a place where you don't speak the language very well. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge, but I'm trying to spend more time, going over to the shop and hanging out with the guys and my teammates. And but it's an adjustment, and it's weird to not have like friends and family. I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is that originally this year I was going to have my parents and my boyfriend and some friends come out to various races, and they were going to make vacations out of it. And it's just, they can't right now. So it's just being out here by myself, which, it's not perfect, but we do what we got to do.
Now, I'm not too familiar with, or I guess I don't follow the NASCAR Euro Series that closely and all. But I know that one thing I've noticed whenever you have like the 24 Hours of Daytona and you have NASCAR, um, and like I guess other series mingling, the difference usually is NASCAR is nothing to sit there and turn a guy or beat and bang, whereas I feel like there's more of a
Mm,
I don't know if it's like a gentleman's respect or or whatever.
right.
In like a NASCAR European series, uh, is that something you have to be mindful of? It's like, oh, I can't just go bump a guy out the way, or is it closer to the US style than I guess I would
Yeah,
assume?
no, it's much more close to European style. So they have pretty strict rules as to kind of what kind of contact you can make, what you can't make. And I'm learning some of that. And but no, I like it better, I think, because it means that you really have to show your craft
Yeah.
when you're making passes. Like, anyone can bump someone out of the way, but if you're forced to really be strategic and prove that you're better, I think it's really cool. And it's hard and it's challenging, but I never I always had a hard time with the reality in US NASCAR that you could just spin someone, you could just
Yeah.
bump someone out of the way and then win the race. And that's, it's totally legal, it's totally like what you do, and you race these guys all the time, so you have to be careful. But to me it was always weird, especially having my origins in racing in, go-karts and formula cars, where you really couldn't make contact like that because it was so dangerous.
Hmm.
So I like it. It's definitely challenging, and the passing style is a little different, and they have slightly different rules, which I'm learning. But I think it's pretty cool. The only thing that's really frustrating is when people will kind of not really block because you're allowed to zig, but you're not allowed to
Mhm.
zag basically. And so they'll just kind of run the whole straightaway down into the braking zone. And so like
Yeah.
they totally take up the passing zone, which makes it really challenging. But it's definitely, they have pretty tight restrictions, and anytime you make contact, it's under review by the officials. So
Mhm.
you definitely have to be careful.
So as a fan, I feel like a lot of times there's these initiatives that I see for people that they're always pushing for. Okay, we need more female drivers. We need more female drivers. But for you, you've actually advocated that not only do we need to push for more female drivers, but we need more females involved in the sport as a whole. You know, whether it's crew chief, engineers, or whatever. For you, why is it important to have women not only as drivers, but also as crew chiefs, engineers, and what else?
Yeah. So just in life in general, the more kind of diverse perspectives you have, the more innovation you have, the easier
Hmm.
problem solving, you're more likely to avoid problems in the first place. And so just that's something I've always been raised with. I was always raised that I could be whatever I want, that, it's good to, you know, find something you like and go after it. And so, especially going through school, and I went to a math and science high school, I just saw that there were always a lot of girls and women who were into the more technical side. And so for me, a lot of people who aren't familiar with racing don't quite realize just how many people besides the driver go
Hmm.
into it, and the driver gets all the glory. But we couldn't do what we do if we didn't have incredible engineers, mechanics, strategists, and all of this stuff. And so I think just to make everyone like better, and to push innovation from a strategy and from a setup standpoint, having more women and minorities can always help. But also I think, as I've gotten older, I think if there are more women on the garage side, it also helps to make the entire atmosphere maybe a little more welcoming
Hmm.
to people who are quote unquote different. Um, and I think that, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, but I just think overall, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens when you put a bunch of different minds together. And so to limit that to only men, I think is a shame. And I feel like the industry can, just see a lot of cool gains if there's more diversity. So it's just something that I've always thought important across the board, not just for drivers.
Yeah, that was one thing that really stood out whenever I was researching for you, because I feel like there's a lot of female drivers out there, and a lot of times that's what it's. You see them talk so much about drivers, and I think that's important. But for you, I was like, well, that's so much cooler to me. It's cool.
Yeah,
It's cool having a female driver, win or whatever. But I'm like, it would be cool to have like a female on the pit box. What about like the first female to win
right.
crew chief or whatever. So it's just cool when I'm like, all right, well, you've got some people that it almost feels like almost like a show thing where it's like, all right, look,
Mm-hmm.
there's a female, racing in the 500, so we did it. We solved
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
diversity. Whereas for you, there's that next step of no,
Well, and
actually,
also just realistically speaking, there's so many more opportunities on the
mhm,
garage side. It's more of a, you need to have a very specific upbringing to be a race car driver. You need to have gotten into it when you were younger. You need to have all of the support. There are only, 40 top level cup drivers, right?
yeah,
So there's limited opportunities there. Whereas on the garage side, you have engineers, you have mechanics, you have crew guys, you have again strategists, you've got people on the operations side. And so if you have, I think, what I would call maybe a more traditional like education path,
yeah.
whether that be on the engineering side or mechanical side or whatever, there are just it's easier, and there are more opportunities to break into racing on that side than just the driver. And so I think, again, just looking at it a whole 360-degree view, it makes sense to try to advocate for that. And we have a couple, like Alba Cologne is great, and you have a handful of lead engineers on the
Mhm.
teams. But like, I'd really love to see the first female crew chief.
Yeah, and so finally, you've been able to have the opportunity to be a contestant on Survivor. Are there any other shows that you'd like to be featured as a contestant on?
Whew, I learned that reality TV is not so much my thing. But that being said, there are two shows that I think would be so fun to do. The one would be American Ninja Warrior. I
Hmm.
think that would be incredible. And then the other one is Dancing with the Stars. I love dancing, so I feel like that would be so much fun.
That's awesome. Well, Julia, thanks so much for joining me today. Like I said, it's cool finding people to interview, and for you, it was someone that the more I dug into research for this interview, there was just so much like substance there, and
Oh, thank you.
it's really cool as a fan to see someone who, like I said, a lot of times I think you have people enter the sport and it just becomes all right, I just want to win, or I whatever. Whereas you have someone that's actually, doing all this stuff. And I mean, even being in the Canon West series, it's not like it's some huge platform, but to see the opportunities you've already had to, give speeches to people, to empower them, to motivate them, to get them into the STEM program. It's really cool as a fan to see a driver that's done so much with the little bit of a platform, I guess, they've had in their career.
Well, thank you. That's so kind and very generous of you to say, and I appreciate that. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can. So thank you.
So now, usually at the end, I let if there's anything that you want to plug, the floor is yours to plug it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. It'll just be for my social media, but I'll go ahead and do that. But yeah, if I love hearing from people. I love hearing from the fans. I try to answer all DMs that I get. So if you want to follow me at Julia Landauer, JuliaLandauer. I love to hear from you and would love to have you on this journey with me.
All right. Thanks so much, Julia.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.